Over the last nearly 3 decades, South Park has been no stranger to the trilogy. In fact, many of the show's most iconic and beloved episodes are 3-part stories: Imaginationland, the Superhero Trilogy, and of course Black Friday. But there's actually an even older South Park 3-parter that I was surprised to learn many fans don't even realize is a trilogy. Back in season 3, fresh off production of the South Park movie, Matt and Trey made the ambitious decision to make 3 episodes of South Park that all happen simultaneously on the same evening. This is, of course, the Meteor Shower Trilogy, and while all 3 of these episodes are pretty different, they also contain some huge revelatory decisions that would shift the future of the show in a very fun interwoven package. So let's talk about South Park's secret trilogy, the Meteor Shower Trilogy. So as I mentioned up top, these episodes were produced immediately after Matt and Trey finished working on South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, which actually kind of makes their decision to immediately roll into an idea this ambitious kind of insane. They had to have been so exhausted after the movie, but rather than one story over 3 episodes, they decided to tell 3 different stories that all happened at the same time.
The idea came up to do a trilogy and basically we knew we had 3 episodes left, so we said, let's feature a kid in each episode and make them all happen on the same night. And that's actually, now that I think about it, a pretty sweet idea.
Yeah, I think it's a totally good idea.
I gotta agree with him, that is a super cool idea. Honestly, I wouldn't even hate to see them revisit this kind of storytelling all these years later, given how much they've evolved as writers and storytellers. But back in 1999, this led to the episodes Cat Orgy, 2 Guys Naked in a Hot Tub, and Jubilee. As they said, all focusing on different members of the main gang. Cat Orgy primarily taking place at Cartman's house, 2 Guys Naked in a Hot Tub following Stan having a bad time at the Meteor Shower party, and Jubilee following Kyle and Kenny at Jew Scouts. I think of the 3 in this trilogy, Cat Orgy is my least favorite, but it still has some pretty fun highlights. Starting, of course, with Cartman's Wild Wild West obsession.
Are you okay, Salma Hayek? Yes, but I need to get out of here. I need some tacos and burritos. Me gusta tacos mucho.
I hadn't thought about it before, but Cartman's stereotyping here was pretty direct foreshadowing to Fat Butt and Pancake Head. He basically said these lines nearly word for word when his hand was Jennifer Lopez, a funny connection 4 years prior to that episode. But I also love that Matt and Trey's inclusion of this Wild Wild West obsession was, as many of their bits were back then, born of pettiness.
This was the week that the South Park movie came out, and we were really pissed off that it was the same week that Wild Wild West came out, the same day that Wild Wild West came out. And of course, Wild Wild West just kicked our ass. Like, they made way more money than we did. And that was just embarrassing to us.
Though there was also another factor in Wild Wild West's success that at the very least was a little bit of a consolation for Matt and Trey.
A lot of kids went and they bought tickets to Wild Wild West, and then they snuck into the South Park movie. So it made all these extra numbers for Wild Wild West.
Overall, as the title might suggest, Cat Orgy is kind of a gross episode. In a couple of ways, actually. But it's also one of the few Shelley-focused episodes in the entire series, and while it's a wild ride to get there, it actually has some pretty nice moments for herself and Cartman. This was before Cartman sort of went full sociopath after all. But it's sort of a classic babysitter story, with Cartman at odds with Shelley over what he can and can't do while she's in charge. Also, Cartman's cat is in heat. Besides just beating the shit out of Cartman, she kicks him off the TV as well.
They mostly come at night. Mostly. They mostly come at night. Mostly.
This is such a funny and specific Newt line to pull from Aliens, and I love how many times Cartman uses the same delivery across the episode. A funny and accurate observation of kids mimicking things they've seen on TV. But before the actual cat orgy, the episode really gets gross when Shelley's 22-year-old boyfriend Skylar comes over. If you're not aware, Shelley is 12.
He's 22! Dude, that's not good.
Obviously, this is before Cartman's big character turn in Scott Tenorman Must Die, but he wasn't exactly a saint at this point, and even he knows that this is disgusting. There is honestly a lot of comedy to be found in everyone else in the episode just sort of being like, dude, what the f***? Even Shelley.
It's just kind of strange to me that you're 22 and all.
But I'm still in high school. I told you I'm a very immature 22-year-old.
Skylar calling himself immature for his age is a pretty funny subversion of the "they're mature for their age" line you'll hear out of these kinds of disgusting scenarios. I don't want to get too in the weeds with details here. It's not particularly fun to talk about. And honestly, Skylar has an argument for one of the worst people in South Park.
Move into my mom's house with me, Shelly, Shelly.
But part of the point of this episode is that Skylar sucks a lot and he fully gets his comeuppance. But I think the real highlight highlight of this episode is how Cartman and Shelley's ongoing conflict resolves in a pretty heartwarming way. Cartman tries calling Leanne at the meteor shower party, but she basically ignores him, and so his whole plan is to use his tape recorder to gather evidence against Shelley and Skylar and get them in trouble. Again, this is all before we see how manipulative Cartman can truly be, but this is a very solid early example of him manipulating his way into a scheme to watch the meteor shower with them, of course mimicking Newt from Aliens to be extra adorable.
They mostly only come every few years. Mostly.
Up to this point in the show, Shelley was mostly known for being angry and violent, though she did protect Stan back in season 1 in a really nice heartwarming ending of an episode. It's interesting that Cartman's lament that he doesn't have siblings does actually get through to Shelley. They're continuing to show that softer side here. She lets Cartman watch the meteor shower with them, where he witnesses Skylar break up with Shelley because she won't put out. Truly, again, one of the most abhorrent individuals ever to set foot in South Park, which makes the end of the episode pretty satisfying. Shelley opens up about how everybody thinks she's ugly, and Cartman actually tells Shelley that he can help her get revenge, Jim West style. I think the end of the episode is really interesting now after years and years of these characters being developed. Cartman has sort of just become more sociopathic, self-centered, and, well, evil. It's hard to imagine modern Cartman, or even Cartman just a few years later, really empathizing with Shelley's pain here. But again, their plan does end up being really satisfying. Cartman uses his stuffed animals and tape recorder to lure Skylar outside before he and Shelley go inside and destroy the thing that Skylar loves most.
Stupid asshole stuffed animals trying to ruin my night. My guitar!
This is a fun moment for Shelley, and the first example of Skylar getting what he deserves, and there's another really sweet moment between Shelley and Cartman here as well. I think as the show has gone on, they've made Shelley a little less aggro, and Cartman a little more evil. Shelley is still smarmy and a bit of a bully, but any episode that has any focus on her tends to have a softer side at some point or another. But even with that development, I don't think there are ever any more meaningful connective moments between Eric and Shelley. Just this one in season 3, and that's it. Which again, I think really speaks to how much Cartman has changed, but it's also just fascinating to see some of these early relationships and connections in South Park that were sort of one-offs and never re-explored. I guess at this point you may be wondering, why is it called Cat Orgy? And well, that's probably because of the cat orgy, complete with cats doing lines of catnip. But Skylar gets a second comeuppance when he gets cat orgied himself thanks to Cartman's quick thinking. Very satisfying way for that turd to go out, and a pretty funny ending. Of the 3 episodes of the Meteor Shower Trilogy, this is my least favorite, but there are some really great classic South Park gags here. Overall, Cat Orgy is mostly a fun episode. Mostly.
Well, I'm a badass cowboy living in the cowboy days. Wicky, wicky, scratch, yo, yo, bang, bang.
The next episode of the trilogy is called Two Guys Naked in a Hot Tub and takes place entirely at the meteor shower party, the one that Leanne was going to in the last episode. It's a fun episode that I think captures a really specific feeling from childhood, when your parents are upstairs at a cool party and you have to do boring kid stuff in the basement. But maybe more importantly, this episode went a shockingly long way to foreshadow future character development and change the hierarchy of Matt and Trey's preferred characters. I talked about this a bit in my old Randy Marsh video, but this was one of the first episodes that really started to give Randy a little more depth than had been seen previously. Yeah, it's primarily focused on a gag about him feeling insecure after he and Gerald pleasure themselves in the hot tub together, but he expresses some sentiments about his life that I think would go on to define the character more and more.
I love having a family and all. I just miss being able to party, drinking and socializing and experimenting with all kinds of different things.
Obviously, we know what this leads to in this episode, but that twinge of regret that he can't try new things leads so directly into the development we'd see from Randy for years, which is constantly becoming obsessed with new things. Baseball fights, Warcraft, weed, cooking shows, the list goes on. But while this storyline hinted at the future of Randy, there's one major aspect of this episode that basically changed the show forever. Stan gets locked in the basement during the party to play with the few other kids that are there, the Melvins, if you will, and this introduces the proper characterization of a fan favorite.
This is the episode that is, in a lot of ways, the birth of Butters, the character Butters, because although we've seen him before, and I think we've heard a line or two from him before, this is really where we needed to make him into a character.
This really was the first real Butters episode. I talk about it in my Big Butters episode as well, but the timing of this is something I also find super interesting, and I didn't really realize this before. One sentiment I've heard from Matt and Trey a few times is how crazy it is that the South Park movie doesn't even feature Butters as he's characterized now, as he's since become an integral, borderline main character. But I never realized that literally the first set of episodes they produced immediately following Bigger, Longer, and Uncut were the episodes that more or less created hated modern Butters, a character who everyone, Matt and Trey included, have grown to adore.
Butters over the years has evolved into definitely one of my top 3 favorite characters.
This episode also had the unforeseen benefit of putting Butters right next to Pip, who is formerly seen as the easy dunk target for the series, and helping them realize that your dorky character can actually be a lot funnier and more fun to write than Pip was.
We really thought our classic nerdy character we had was Pip, but then really after this episode we realized Butters was
Butters is a better character.
Butters' supporting role really helped catapult him up the South Park kid hierarchy, at least in terms of story use. It's funny to think that he wasn't properly characterized until mid-season 3, and then by season 6, he was used as a Kenny replacement. And it's also easy to see why he was so instantly appreciated. He is very funny in this episode, especially in pitching that they all play Charlie's Angels together.
Can I be Jacqueline Smith? Can I? No, I get to be Jacqueline Smith. See, I thought of Charlie's Angels. I get to be Jacqueline Smith because I thought of it.
The whole Charlie's Angels thing actually hits in a really funny way towards the end as they try to prevent the meteor shower party from getting Waco'd, which is really the whole other aspect of this episode. Apparently, Matt and Trey had watched a documentary about the 1993 Waco siege incident and decided to just recreate those events as though the ATF believed the meteor shower party was some kind of dangerous cult that intended to commit mass suicide.
We did this all before in Waco. Yes, but you totally screwed up Waco. You killed a bunch of innocent people and then tried to say they killed themselves.
The episode has a pretty fun conclusion. With everybody at the party too wasted to know what's going on, Stan successfully maneuvers Charlie's Angels to zipline down and deliver evidence that it isn't actually a cult party, stopping the ATF before the party is any wiser. Well, except for the people that the ATF murdered. But I like this little Stan story here. He sort of huffed and puffed about being forced to hang out with the Melvins, but in the end, he managed to coordinate all of them, and each was integral in the plan to stop the ATF from Wacoing everybody. Dougie was the on-camera talent for the video they produced, Pip got a perfect shot down with the plunger rope, and Butters ziplined successfully to the newsman. Stan's customary speech is all about how he shouldn't have treated the kids so badly, and that the perception of those kids at school kind of peer pressured him into thinking the way he did. A nice sentiment that he immediately retracts when Kyle shows up.
You think you had a bad night? I had to hang out all night with these friggin' Melvins.
Oh, dude, weak.
Of course, the other resolution is Randy being so self-conscious that people might know about what he did in the hot tub that he yells it for all the party to hear, only for nobody to really give a shit about it, which I think leads to probably the most important takeaway from two guys naked in a hot tub.
Does watching a friend off make you gay? Which we've learned, no, it certainly doesn't.
I quite like this second episode. It's got a nostalgically relatable premise for the kids at the party, there's some harsh and poignant social commentary, and a funny subversive story for Randy and Gerald, not to mention the advent of modern Butters. But as solid as this one is, I think the finale of the Meteor Shower Trilogy is probably my favorite of the 3.
This hurls us, of course, into the 3rd episode of the trilogy.
Chilling conclusion.
Jubilee is an example of South Park's early absurdism at its best. Following Kyle as he brings Kenny to their Jew Scout meeting, the episode opts to combine the Jewish faith, weird and mindless Cub Scout activities, and straight up supernatural sci-fi lore to create one of the wildest episodes of the first few seasons. And funny enough, it really only got this absurd because the crew was absolutely burnt out from finishing the movie and then rolling into these final few episodes of their production run. They were basically mentally checked out at this point.
Usually we really care about how good the shows are, and this time we were like, F it, who cares? Just make it dumb and weird. And it ended up being one of the best, our favorite shows.
I just love the mishmash of concepts here. For one, how casual Kyle and everyone are about Moses in this world.
What the fuck is that? That's Moses, stupid.
Besides the fact that Moses is literally just the MCP from Tron, which is very funny on its own, I think the absolute funniest thing here is that the offerings for Moses are all of the boring, busy work crafts that you do at these kinds of scout camps.
Let's all show Moses our soap sculptures so that he may rejoice and be pleased.
And it's not just that this is what they offer, it's what Moses actually wants.
I desire macaroni pictures. I desire popcorn necklaces.
This, of course, answers the younger kids' all-important and ridiculously adorable question at the Squirts camp.
How come we have to make macaroni pictures?
And then the other angle here is the undermining of the ritual by the quote-unquote anti-Semitic sect of Judaism, an elder who wishes to pray and seek guidance from Haman instead of Moses. Haman is the central antagonist from the book of Esther, whose plot to destroy the Jewish people within the Persian Empire was foiled. They basically just took this old story from scripture and layered it right onto this South Park episode, of course with the fantasy and sci-fi twist. Elder Garth captures Moses in a conch shell and attempts to summon Haman during the meteor shower. before. God, this really is one of the weirdest South Parks ever. Kind of ahead of its time, honestly. There's also a subplot with Ike and the Squirts leader, who tries to lead the group of tiny children to capture a bear, only for each of the kids to continually be picked off one by one. Maybe the funniest of all is when the bear lures them into a trap and captures all of the rest of the kids at one time. This dude's continuous insistence on putting these tiny children in danger so he can earn a new badge is pretty funny scout humor.
Matthew, you immobilize the bear with the net, then Echo Team run up and attack it with your squirt knife.
And again, another example of how many wild ideas went into this episode, especially considering this conclusion.
See this little bear cub? It's his birthday.
Yeah, so his mommy brought us all over to play with him.
Beyond the hilariously bizarre intertwining of all these ideas, this episode is another of the earliest and best examples of Kenny's selfless nature getting a focus. Honestly, Kenny has a great arc in this episode. He's pretty incredulous about everything at Jew Scouts when he first gets there. He even laughs at the idea and calls their chanting to Moses stupid, but is obviously immediately proven wrong when Moses is summoned and then he's exiled for not being Jewish. But despite being ostracized and exiled, Kenny actually sticks around, realizing that Kyle and the rest of the scouts are in danger. And in the end, he literally sacrifices himself to free Moses from the conch shell, who then eviscerates Elder Garth. The way they frame Kenny's sacrifice here is very funny.
He saved us. He saved all the Jews.
Without saying as much, they basically parallel Kenny as the new Moses.
Every year we shall gather here in this special place and bring Kenny tidings of soap sculptures and macaroni pictures.
God, what a great, profoundly stupid episode. It definitely feels like this influenced how they approach stories moving forward for at least a handful of years, and Matt and Trey basically say as much in the commentary.
Which really taught us a very important lesson. I think this show actually really helped us too with the shows to come and made South Park better eventually, which is we just realized don't sit around a table and figure out your plot for very long. Just be stupid and
have fun.
And have fun, and it'll come out.
I think for all of its hilariously out there story decisions, plus a strong Kenny character arc, this is pretty easily my favorite of the trilogy. But as a whole, the Meteor Shower Trilogy has so much to offer, even as just individual stories. It's got a rare and early empathetic Cartman story, some of the earliest explorations of Randy's psyche, the creation of modern Butters, and a quality, selfless Kenny storyline. It's good stuff. Obviously, this trilogy isn't anything like South Park's other trilogies, given that it's still 3 separate stories, albeit on the same evening. But the other really fun aspect of this trilogy is that little moments and scenes in each episode actually connect certain points of each story together. In Cat Orgy, Cartman calls his mom at the meteor shower party. Then in Two Guys Naked in a Hot Tub, when the ATF is scoping out the house, we see this exact moment from their scope as they observe the party. Then at the end of that episode, obviously Kyle and Ike show up, meaning that this final scene takes place after the entirety of the events of Jubilee, which also has a scene where Kenny sees the ATF heading towards the meteor shower party.
It's actually pretty cool. At the end of every episode, we have something from the other episodes happening.
There are other details too that sort of allow all of the events to have a general order when intertwined. Leanne at home, plus Gerald and Sheila dropping off the kids at Jew Scouts before all going to the party. Gerald is featured heavily at the party itself. The start of an actual meteor shower itself, which you can see in 2 of the episodes. There are just a few road marks here and there.
You can sort of like, if you put them into a computer, you could edit them all into like an hour-and-a-half long thing and cut in between them and it would all make sense.
Matt and Trey mentioned this, and so I actually tried it. It was a rough piecing together, and I want to mess with it more, but there are tons of ways you can actually intertwine these 3 episodes into a sort of pseudo-movie as long as you make sure certain beats happen in a certain order. I think the most important thing is figuring out the pacing, how often to cut between moments from each episode, how long to sit with them, etc. And it's actually a pretty fun exercise. I'm probably going to keep messing with this until I think it's perfect. Honestly, I encourage any editors out there to give it a shot as well. I've always really appreciated the Meteor Shower Trilogy for being so unorthodox, and honestly, I feel like if Matt and Trey tried something like this again, they could do something even more special. There are obviously plenty of things tying these stories together, but it would be cool to see those intersecting points have even more of an impact on one another. But I think this foreshadowed a lot of things Matt and Trey would show more interest in later with South Park. More explicit trilogies, serialization, continuity. It was cool that they were experimenting with format so early in the show's run, to the point where a lot of people are still learning that these episodes are actually all related. I think it's a pretty cool trilogy, and honestly, not sure how else to end this video.
Well, I'm a badass cowboy living in the cowboy days. Wicky, wicky, scratch, yo, yo, bang, bang.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust 'em.